When did your gut feeling of something's not right here save you? Worked as a shot girl at a pub. One night I rejected someone who attempted to get my number. Not unusual, and he didn't seem that bothered. The whole exchange wasn't strange to me. In the early hours after the bar closed, I went to leave through the back door into the car park like usual when I saw the sensor light outside was on. Someone was stood just outside the door. I felt uneasy, so went out the front and asked one of the bouncers to walk me round the back to my car. As we rounded the corner, we spotted this guy lurking outside the door holding his belt like a makeshift garrote. When he saw us, he started screaming that I was a ducking BTCH and I should die. He scampered off into the road and never came back. Someone came into my work that gave me the I'm in danger feeling. I work in a place where 60% of my customers are children, and I naturally get very protective of them. But you can't call the police because someone's creeping you out. He kept getting close to children but not doing anything or even making them uncomfortable, so there still wasn't anything I could do. He leaves and I shrug it off. Another customer soon comes in and gives me the same feeling. So I'm thinking I'm just anxious today. He's talking about Donkey Kong and stuff. Casual conversation. Then he says I'm best friends with Martin Bryant, the spree killer from the 1996 Port Arthur massacre, who is in solitary confinement and can't even interact with whoever has to throw his food at him, so I'm getting a bit nervous now. Then the first creepy guy comes in. And the one I was talking to says I know him. We went to prison together. So immediately I start having a panic attack and have to end the conversation as quick as possible so I can contact the manager to say I need someone else to come into the store. I was there alone. And they immediately call the police. Turns out they were both registered sex offenders. Neither were allowed anywhere near my work because it's too close to the CBD. And they're legally now allowed near anywhere that could have children there. I actually recently went to court for this. Waited hours to go in and he plead guilty at the very last second. B starred. Edit. I offered way too many details and now I'm super uncomfortable with everyone guessing where I work. I've had terrible experiences with people finding out where I work and I'm a bit spooked. I woke up at 3 AM once sitting upright in bed. I felt on alert and my heart raced when I saw that my cat was on alert too. Wide awake by my feet with his ears perked up. But I didn't see or hear anything weird. Something didn't feel right and I couldn't relax. So I got up and went to the kitchen. Turned on some lights and ate food even though I wasn't that hungry. Eventually went back to bed. We discovered the next morning that someone had stopped while in the process of using some kind of tool to silently cut a big hole in the glass window in the living room. They were trying to break in. Right next to the bedroom. I think the lights I turned on scared them away. Edited to add that we had 3 long years of issues with our neighbors. They repeatedly came into our property and WP said that we put up a 9-foot fence to keep them out. This attempted break-in happened right after the fence went up and 2 days before they all moved out. Glad those pieces of shit are long gone. I'm a firefighter. We got called out to a tree fire started by fallen power lines. We pull up in the truck and I'm trusting that my driver and crew leader are doing their job and have good situational awareness. We get out of the truck and we park next to a set of power lines, not fallen. It's a very windy night and I can see the lines swinging, so I voice my concerns to my crew leader who says it'll be fine. We get out, hose out. Risk of the tree fire catching onto a house outweighing potential risk of arcing, plus the line disconnected when it fell, and I'm on the branch ready to start putting it out with 2 others near me when I get to chill. I look up, see the lines swinging violently and yell everyone ducking move. As the 3 of us sprint and dive out of the way, we hear a thwip and crack and sure enough the line we were under came loose and stayed connected to the power pole. If I hadn't got that chill, chances are we would have had 3 fried fireys. Had a friend who said we should go to this party he was invited to by a classmate of his. We ended driving out to it. We noticed the neighborhood was not pleasant and sketchy. We saw that house had some lights on in backyard but kind of quiet for a party. I decided that we should not go since something felt really off. Friend ended finding the classmate that invited him got robbed and threatened when he went to party. It ended up being a fake party. My daughter was a year and a half at the time. She had a cold. But bedtime went off without a hitch. I woke up in the middle of the night that night. Really uncomfortable and anxious. Something was off and I couldn't put my finger on it. I got up. Had a midnight snack. Tried to calm my nerves. I decided to check on my kids, who shared a room, before trying to go back to sleep. I get in there and immediately I hear a light sound coming from her crib, so wheezing. It was so quiet. There was no way to hear it outside of the room. I got her up and saw that her breathing was fast and labored. I took her to the hospital, where she ended up with an overnight stay, oxygen, and nebulizer treatments because her oxygen had dipped. She was diagnosed with reactive airway disease due to the cold, which triggered the asthma attack. Not me, but when my mum was a teenager on the 18th of November 1987. She was going to London to visit a friend. It was around 7:20 PM and she decided she was going to take a taxi instead of going by tube because it didn't feel right. King's Cross tube station. 10 minutes later the whole station caught on fire and 30 out of the 40 people died. She had decided to take the tube, she would likely have died. While I was walking home. Wasn't late and I'm from a pretty safe area, but it was that time of year when it starts to get dark really early, so felt kind of ominous. Anyway, I pass this guy in a red sweater and red tracksuit bottoms and he looks at me funny. Maybe he's high. Maybe he's drunk. Either way, something not quite right about him. I keep going. Look behind me. He's still there. Cross the road. He crosses with me. As soon as I turn a corner I sprint to my apartment complex and run into the coded gate and wait. He rocks up a minute later and stares at me through the gate. He just stares at me for a good 10 or so seconds, then runs back the way he came. Shivers. Posted this before. Took my 2 babies to an in-home daycare run by a lovely woman. About 9 days in. The woman's teenage son was home when I picked up my kids. He gave me a super creepy vibe. Pulled the kids from the daycare and placed them elsewhere. Maybe 10 years later that kid murdered 2 people then killed his mom. Some dude get off the bus at the same stop as me. It's about 8 PM and October, so it's quite dark out already. He had spoken to me on the bus. One line about nice weather. Anyway, he gets off the bus after me. I cross the road and make a mental note of him walking the opposite way to me. I make sure to watch him walking away. Something in my gut says not to trust him. Get to my house I have to walk up a hill with a path alongside a high stone wall. It is secluded. Usually I listen to music as I walk. I decide not to this time. I'm about halfway up when I get this awful feeling. I take out my phone. Dial my mother's number and as I do I hear fast steps of someone running up behind me. I know it's the guy before I turn around and as I do he is literally running full speed towards me. I look him dead in the eyes. Ready to fight for my life. As I do this, my mother answers her phone and I say hi mom. He slows right down to a light jog and says evening as he jogs past me. I ask my mom to stay on the line. Her BF comes out to meet me at the top of the hill. The guy is nowhere to be seen. He was definitely running up behind me to strike me, and by turning to face him I'm certain it threw him off. Was at a party in a rough neighborhood. I made a lot of poor choices as a teen. I'm vaguely aware of an argument going on somewhere else in the house. I couldn't put a finger on it. The tension was rising. I decided it was time to go. I grabbed my friends and left. Not 10 minutes after we left, someone pulled a gun and fired a few rounds. Some random girl was hit, non-fatally. Anyway, someone stole someone else's coke. So the guy left. Came back with a gun. Threatened some people. Then lost control of the situation and shot some poor girl. Edit. Since apparently there's some confusion. The coke in question was cocaine. Not me but my dad. I was too stupid to listen to him. I used to live on the roughest council estate in my hometown when I was very young. Very dangerous for anyone, let alone kids, so for that reason my parents rarely let me outside unless I was with other kids being supervised or within sight of my parents. This story is regarding the latter one. I wanted to go to the nearby park but my dad said no, as there were some rough people over there and that I could only play outside on the steps to our flat building, which I agreed to, although I had no intention of doing that, lol. As soon as I went outside I went right to the park and began playing. I kept glancing over at the two people and noticed them constantly looking over at me, which made me nervous, but I was like 5 years old so cared more about fun than my own safety. Anyway, the two people approached me. They'd been drinking and cornered me by a fence when I tried to run. They grabbed a hold of me when out of nowhere I heard my dad shouting at them. He ran over and it's the only time I ever saw him get physical with anybody, but he handed their asses to them whilst screaming obscenities at them for putting their hands on his son. He grabbed a hold of my arm and dragged me back home, all whilst swearing at me for being so stupid. I got a good hiding over that and was grounded for weeks. Years later I asked him about it and he told me that he just knew that I would go to the park so followed me to keep an eye on me. He didn't expect anything to happen to me, but when it did he went mental. There's been a few times where I hadn't listened to my gut, but one sticks out where I did. I used to live in a smaller Minnesotan town down near some train tracks and a bike running path that extends out of town into the woods. One evening I'm sitting outside on my porch drinking a couple of beers with my buddy. Two dudes walk up on us kind of out of nowhere and immediately something seemed off with them. It's a college town and drunk people come up onto your porch a lot or randomly just say hello on their way to or from the bars downtown. But these dudes had a badass vibe to them. I had a little black Louisville Slugger lying next to me on the porch, so I grabbed and just held it across my lap. One dude asks us, "You guys got an extra smoke?" Buddy says nope. The other guy comes up real close almost onto the porch and says, "Did you see my face?" I just kept looking forward but not directly at him and just said, "Nah man, we didn't see anything." He said something like, "Good. Lil punk ass." And they both walked away. 2 nights later I'm sitting in my living room with the same buddy and the local news is on. 2 guys arrested for robbing and stabbing a man a couple nights back on the trail down by the train tracks next to where I live. My buddy had looked at their faces coming up and I had seen the dude clear as day that had asked for the smoke. It was those same ducking guys. Was riding my motorcycle with a friend on the back. We were going down a country road behind a truck hauling a bunch of old car tires when all of a sudden I decided we shouldn't be there. So I slowed way down to let the truck go ahead of us. Just as I did, one of the tires fell off the truck and landed right where we would have been. Was hunting for early morels and king boletes last May up near Clallam. No luck. So went further over towards Hancock. About 2/3 RDS up a hillside I felt like I was being watched. I slowly realized that I couldn't hear any animals making noise. Hackles raised. I immediately started down the most direct path to my car. One trail above where I was parked I saw a partial juvenile male deer skeleton under a large conifer. As I double timed it past, I looked up and saw the rest of the bones and sinew slung up in the branches. Up came the knife and I slowed down, turning and scanning every few yards until I got into my car and booked it out of there. The next day 2 mountain bikers were attacked by a cougar and one was killed very near to the area I was hiking. I carry a handgun now for my mushroom hunts. I had something like this one time in elementary school when we had a recess. It was pretty average and we left at the normal time, but it just felt very off to me. But because I was 8 and didn't have common sense yet, I brushed the feeling off. Turns out that there was literally a guy had been scoping out a playground for kids to lure to him for a while in a stereotypical large white van. First time was 3 weeks after getting my gallbladder out. I felt terrible, I still had a drain in my stomach. I called my sister and said, "I'm afraid I'll be dead tomorrow." Went to the emergency room and turns out the surgeon had nicked my liver and I was bleeding internally. It turned into a blood blister on my liver and if it popped I would have bled to death. Second time I had been feeling like someone was squeezing around my chest for months. I passed out one morning. Went to the hospital and they found a tumor between my heart and lungs. Turned out to be cancer. A couple surgeries and chemo and I've been in remission almost 5 years. I was in Turkey for vacation when I was about 7 or 8 years old and I made friends with some other tourists but also some locals. All around the age range of 8-16. These 2 local guys were about 16. And at one point during the late afternoon they asked if I wanted to go with them to go kart outside of the hotel area. And I agreed. Approximately 30 seconds of walking along with them. I got the most chilling feeling I've ever had in my life. All the hairs on my skin rose up and I had this super uneasy feeling deep in my gut. It actually felt like some supernatural force was beckoning me to dip. I turned on my heels and sprinted so fast to get back to the hotel. I didn't even look back. When I returned, my mother asked where I had been. I told her I was taking a rough tea. Oddly enough, I was quite fond of those guys before this happened. But thinking about this in retrospect, why would 2 local 16-year-olds have any genuine interest in go-karting with a young 8-year-old tourist? I feel like I may have dodged a bullet. We may never know. I am a petite woman and was 19 at the time. Had a late shift that ended at 10 PM. Hit the grocery before my walk home, about 10 blocks. I've got arms full of groceries and notice a car drive past me in the opposite direction. Heard it pull a U-turn behind me and park. I tell myself, probably just getting home from work too. But then I hear footsteps behind me. I turn around and it's a man in his 30s. I'd guess. He doesn't say anything, but stops walking when I stopped walking. I keep walking. Bit faster now and I can hear him speed up too. I turn around again and say, "Hey man. What's up?" He says nothing. I turn around and keep walking. Almost at a mini jog pace and I hear him speed up too. I was about 4 blocks away from home. The adrenaline kicked in. I dropped my bags and booked it. Made it home. Told my boyfriend what was happening. As he goes outside to find the guy. Dude drives by in his car. Right past my house. We call the cops. Give them a description and the operator tells us they've had other calls about the same guy. Really hoping he never actually caught someone. Really hoping his creepy ass wound up in jail. Really happy I listened to my gut. I live in Southern California and growing up living by the beach I would go surfing a lot. Almost every day during the summer with my buddies. One day I wanted to go but no one else could go so I decided it was fine and I would go by myself. Not a huge deal, I've gone surfing alone in the past and there are always other people in the lineup to hang around. Anyway, I get to the beach and when I paddle out I noticed there wasn't anyone out yet. Or waves for me. I thought. But after a while something just felt off. I don't really know how to explain it but it was a very eerie feeling as if I was being watched. I don't think I've ever felt such an acute feeling like that before or since then but I just listened to my gut feeling and paddled in and went home. The next morning a swimmer died at that exact beach from a great white shark attack. I haven't been surfing since and that was 10 years ago. This is a 1,000,000% true story about the time my addiction to cigarettes saved me life from 9/11. I live in Pennsylvania, but used to work in Manhattan when I was 20 and still living at home with my folks. My older brother also worked in Nick and we usually took the same train to get up to the city. One fall morning, my brother had to go into the city early for a meeting. So I went with him to the station to catch the early train. This would have got me to my office pretty early and since I was a junior help desk guy, I didn't have much I could do if I got to work early. And I'd been up to the top of both the Empire State Building and the Statue of Liberty before. But never to the observation deck of the World Trade Center. So, I figured, why not take the early train? Hop off with my brother to cross into Lower Manhattan. And go take in the view? I'd be a little late to work. But no problem. The train pulls in and I just felt compelled to have a smoke. Like the single most important thing in the world was for me to just sit on a bench, light another cigarette, and let that train go. So I told my brother I'd catch the next train and head straight to work. I'd go to the World Trade Center another day. And that's what I did. I lit a cigarette. I waited for the next train. And got to New York City in the middle of the waking nightmare that was 9/11. So I politely rejected a guy who asked me out randomly once at a bus stop. He was perfectly civil and not unattractive. He took no for an answer graciously. But I just got a really bad vibe for whatever reason and decided to take a bus in the opposite direction at the last second straight to my boyfriend's house to get away from him. Reading the paper a few days later, there was a really awful, brutal animal cruelty incident right around that intersection. Don't want to get any more specific for the sake of anonymity, and the suspect's sketch description looked almost freaking identical to the bus stop guy. Who knows how he treats women if he mutilates animals? I still get really uncomfortable thinking about it. Was hiking by myself, real smart. I get this feeling that something wasn't right. But I normally act on that feeling. That day, however, I ignored it. Went to a lookout. Turned around and headed back. About the same place as I got the feeling, I noticed cougar tracks cross mine in the snow. They followed mine for a few meters and then went to a bit of shrub that overlooked both where I was now and the lookout. I immediately left and avoided going anywhere near something that would give a cougar cover. Occasionally behind me I would notice a small rustle in the bushes and trees or some snow falling off a disturbed branch. I was like 5 or 6 when my mum and sisters wanted to go for a drive out of town. I cried and cried because I just didn't want to go with them for some reason. And decided to go with my other sister in her car. Turns out, my mum and other sisters ended up crashing. And they said if you were in the car, you would have had to sit in the middle. And you would have died. Luckily my fam was okay though. But I sure did feel really cool after that. I just remembered another one more recent. Last year around this time I was waiting for my underground train to show up. It was about 7 AM and it was very crowded. Next to me was a weird looking guy with a bag that had some wood handle sticking out. He was acting very weird. Twitching. Moving. Sweating. He was very agitated and seemed out of it. IDK if he had mental health problems or was high on some weird tea. Either way I moved from next to him because I could feel my ducking hair stand up in fear. I went next to the stairs. Thank God I did BC. Next thing I know someone fell against me and I almost fell on the railway. That creepy guy had a hammer in his bag and started swinging it and hitting people with it, and he hit a woman who was walking behind me in the head. Worst thing is that people who weren't as close didn't even realize it was happening. He hit like 20 people before he was stopped. I'm not sure if anyone died, but he put someone in a coma. Sorry for formatting. On mobile. Not me, but my best friend was driving to California from Arizona with her 2-year-old for work. About 5 months ago, and she stopped at a gas station and just got a weird feeling. She normally doesn't lock her car when she pumps gas, but she decided to do it. During that process a woman came up to her and started talking all nice and whatnot. She got an uneasy feeling about it and heard a noise like someone trying to open a door. She turned around and saw the woman's husband trying to get into her car to steal her baby. She told him to get the duck away from her car. And the man tried to play it off. She told them to duck off and got in her car to leave. The couple got in their vehicle and followed her. Tried to swerve her off the road and brake check her on the highway for a few miles. She was smart enough to call the cops. This was in Prim, Nevada BTW, and they caught up to her and ended up arresting the couple. They had gotten multiple reports that day of issues like that. Put a piece of furniture up for sale on Craigslist. Nothing fancy or crazy expensive. Just a used bike. Guy emailed and said I got $140 for it today. And I got the thing new for $160. So I was psyched. Said, okay. And gave him a general address, not exact. Didn't hear from him all day. Which isn't weird with Craigslist. But something felt weird, so I googled his name from his email, and it turns out he's been arrested several times for home burglary and robbery. Blocked him and gave the bike to friend for free. I was driving on the road one night and I saw a car in the middle of the road with 2 people lying on the ground. My gut feeling was that something is suspicious here and I decided to act on it by driving past the car and the 2 people. I stopped to take my phone out and call the police and I look at my rearview mirror to see the 2 people lying on the road stand up with 5 other people coming out of the bushes. First party I went to. A Pasa Caribbean party. I felt something was off about the energy and the fact that some guys looked like they were gonna get busy, so I left. As I leave the building I hear gunshots and cops come. Second party is in an abandoned flimsy building. The DJ told us plenty times to stop jumping in the middle of the floor. Obviously since we were young. No one cared. I did. I left and my friend told me the next day how the floor caved in and a lot of people got injured. Third party. Another Pasa. These girls start throwing bottles at each other and another guy brought in drugs. I got out of there and not 2 minutes later a bunch of cops come. These are only from parties I've been to. When I was about 20. Many years ago. I had taken up the sport of skydiving. I was scheduled to make a jump at a small town about 60 miles from the major city in which I lived. I got on my motorcycle to make the trip, but my gut feeling was I shouldn't do this today. After driving a block, I turned around and went home. I didn't bother to call the jump master and tell him I wouldn't be there. The next time I was there to make a jump he asked me about that day. Why I never showed up. I told him about being on the road and having this really queasy feeling about it. He said, yeah. When you get that feeling you always need to obey it. No one ever mocked me for being chicken. Who knows if there was a motorcycle accident waiting for me or a bad jump with a chute that wouldn't open. But I'm 62 now and live to tell this story. Not me but my mom. It was like 12:30 at night and she was a senior at college in Las Vegas. She was walking back to her apartment when she felt like she was being followed. But when she turned around no one was there. Still, she walked pretty quickly to her apartment building. A few minutes later, she heard footsteps behind her and saw a tall white dude hunched over a bit, with a knife in his hand. She took off as fast as she could and by some miracle a guy was walking the opposite way on the sidewalk with a concealed gun. He saw my mom and once she ran past him, whipped out his handgun and pointed it at the man, who apparently stopped and flipped them off before running away. He walked her back to the apartment and my mom reported the guy with the knife to the police the next day. I don't know if he was ever caught, but my mom might have been kidnapped or killed if she hadn't initially realized something was off. Edit. Sorry. I hate to be like OMG I got attention for once, but thanks for the upvotes. Close bracket. On holiday when I was younger, my parents told me that I was finally old enough that I didn't have to share a bedroom with my brother, and could have my own room downstairs if I wanted. Got a gut feeling that I shouldn't and ended up rooming with my bro. Within a day or so, burglars broke into all the houses in the complex, and were using what would have been my room as a safe point to loot through all the stuff they'd stolen. Don't know what would have happened if they walked into a room with an 8-year-old girl alone, asleep.